everyone, and welcome back to Sunday Reads with Renee. Here at Simply Renee. My name is Renee. And I want to say thank you so much to everyone who has liked, shared, commented, subscribed, and clicked the notification bell to my channel. I truly appreciate it as it helps me to grow. And thank you so much for watching the videos and recommending me. Video, I am doing a double book review on America's Woman by Gail Collins and First Generations by Carol Berkin. And these are two nonfiction books that focus specifically on American women throughout history and their contributions. And they are a little different in some different ways, even though they're giving a broad overview of America's woman, they're doing things differently. In the case of Gail Collins' America's Woman, she's looking at a broad overview of everything from the 1600s right up until the 20th century, whereas Carol Berkin's book, First Generations, is focused more on women within the 17th century and as well as the 18th century itself. So they are a little different in some ways, but they're also giving a broad overview of the American woman perspective. And they are older nonfiction works, though. Gail Collins' book's from 2003, whereas Carol Berkin's is from 1996. Nonetheless, I do like these books, and I can't wait to review them. Before I begin, I just want to let everyone know that I will be using alternative words and phrases due to YouTube rules and regulations, and I will be revealing plot details to these books, therefore spoilers are ahead. The first book I'll review is America's Woman by Gail Collins, and this was published in 2003. It is a nonfiction work that gives a broad 400-year overview of the experiences of women in America from the 1600s up until the 20th century. In this book, you'll find a great deal of overview, of course, that's very well written and well researched. And what it does is it goes into a broad overview of everything from the experience of women through different points in time. It goes from the 1600s, where these women are arriving in the New World and having these different experiences of trying to really establish themselves in a world that's different from their own in England and other parts of Europe, whether that is trying to be wives, mothers, and housekeepers, as well as really trying to cement themselves in society as much as possible and finding those challenges because there aren't a lot of rights and laws that really benefit them to have more equality as well as legal rights as women. And it also goes into different things such as witchcraft, being accused of heresy, the challenges they face in that regard. And it continues on into the rest of history throughout America, whether that is into the American Revolution and their experiences of that, especially in the Civil War as nurses and trying to survive the battlefronts. And it goes, of course, into the 20th century where it discusses their suffrage efforts, where they're trying to gain rights to vote so they can vote legally in elections and have that right to do so, and even early feminist activities. What the book also does focus on is a broad overview of the experiences of women who are not white. It does talk frequently about Black women and their experiences as both enslaved and free women and the challenges they face in trying to gain their own rights, independence, and equality, as well as civil rights especially. And unfortunately, there isn't too much information that goes on. There's only one section on it that focuses entirely on enslavement, which is very important to focus on because that is a vital part of our history. That's also one of the darkest parts, and I'm glad that Gail Collins did talk about that in more detail. At the same time, she does weave a lot of different stories into the entire America's Women's history, such as when they talk about voting rights, they do talk about the differences between white women's fight for voting rights as well as Black women's fights for it, where despite the fact that we did achieve that great amendment in 1920 of getting women the ability to vote legally in elections and finally have that chance, it didn't affect everybody. It didn't really benefit everybody. And so as a result, Black women had to fight a lot harder going forward. There's also one section in particular that talks more about the Native American indigenous side and what women went through and experienced, which is displacement and trying to survive, but also seeing their homelands get destroyed and the horrible things that happened with them as well. So there is a lot of different things that do come into this book, which I feel are important to give more perspective on everyone's experience, whether it's the positive, the negative, or the in-between. But at the same time, because of the research that Gail Collins is doing in the early 2000s, there isn't too much to go on compared to now, where we are pulling out more research as we go. And at the same time, the book is such a huge, big, all broad overview that I don't think she had much time to really focus on every single person's experiences. But nonetheless, I'm glad she did put that in there. There's also the immigrant experience in the 1500s, where immigrants are coming over here to the New World and finding both success, failure, and struggles. It does go into socioeconomic details as well, where you see the wealthy perspective as well as the middle class and the lower class. And it goes into huge detail too, where there's struggles in the Great Depression, there's struggles to really gain feminism as well as create activities where they're not always in the home completely, which is important and vital in so many ways, but having more equality beyond the home, such as working jobs and going into higher positions that are traditionally more associated with male occupation, as well as really trying to gain equality, of course, in the 20th century. All in all, this is a book that I really enjoy because it gives that broad overview of everything. It really focuses a lot on the broad overview of the history of America's women in America throughout 400 years. But again, it does have those downsides, and a lot of it is just due to research done at that time in the early 2000s. And also, there is the challenge of trying to find perspectives from everyone when there isn't too much to go on. In the case of enslaved women, there isn't a lot of evidence to really go on to really tell their stories in a huge way because it's not there or it hasn't been found and there hasn't been much there to really go on in our archives or records. So we can only go from primary sources that are available to the secondary sources that have been researched over time. So there are some downsides in how we do the historical research, and this is something that Collins does address. But she also wanted to focus on the experiences of women who aren't very well known. So even though she talks a lot in the beginning about Virginia Dare and her challenges to come over to the New World in the 1500s with Roanoke, she does focus on other women who face similar challenges as her and what their experiences are like through more of the research she did to really focus on that and really put more of a broad perspective on it to help enhance the information that was available at that time and give it to the audience as well, including the reader. So I do appreciate that Gail Collins did that. And it is a book I recommend if you're looking for a more broad overview of America's women and want to get that started with just understanding, again, the broad overview, but also really increasing more of your knowledge to do more of your own research, because we are at a time where I think we are focusing more on different types of research of different people's perspective. There's still more to do. So this is a good way for you to get started. And it is a well-written, well-researched book that I highly recommend, and it can help you get started on that journey. Review is First Generations by Carol Berkin. And this is a 1996 published nonfiction work that focuses a lot on the broad overview of women in America during the 17th and 18th century. This book is an interesting one in the fact that the way Birkin sets it up is that it focuses on the white woman perspective more, not surprising given a lot of the research at that time and even to some extent today. There's more to go on that than that of women of color. But what you find is that she does put it in a way that's a little bit different and unusual, at least at that time in 1996. And that is that she focuses on the experience of white women in the Chesapeake area, New England, as well as the middle areas of America that don't get as much attention as they should. Now, when it comes to the way she does this, is that Birkin really focuses on how there's a difference between these white women in terms of class, religion, and different types of economic experiences, as well as socioeconomic experiences. In the case of the Chesapeake area, you have women who are finding themselves as both willing and forced immigrants who are coming to the Chesapeake area. And by forced immigrants, I mean indentured servants. And what you're finding in the Chesapeake is that there is a little bit more wealth that these women are experiencing to some degree, thanks to being by the waterways and shipping. And then you have New England, which does have some shipping, but they're relying on different types of means, such as farming and other such types of industries, and they're doing a more governmental role. It's a little bit different from the Chesapeake. And in terms of New England, you're finding women trying to do a little bit more traditional roles, such as motherhood, good wives, housekeeping, but they're also trying to challenge the legality systems in some ways and different ideas. There's a different experience between Puritan and Quaker women that's focused a lot more into this chapter on the New England side of the white woman perspective. And you also see them being challenged and faced with being charged with witchcraft and heresy as well. Then you have the middle areas, which aren't really focused on too much. And by that, I'm referring to different types of middle areas of the way, such as Pennsylvania and New York, where you're finding a lot more crisscrossing of everything from the socioeconomic standpoint of white women, as well as religion and legality rights and such. So there's a lot more crisscrossing that's taking place in those middle areas. But then you have the two chapters that focus specifically on women of color, one with Black women, the other with Native American Indigenous women, and they're very different experiences. In the case of the Indigenous women, they focus more on what their lives were like before settlers came to America and those experiences where, depending on the different types of tribes, you had women having a vastly great role to a lesser role, depending again on the tribes, but also the great challenges and horrors and horrific mistreatment they faced when settlers came over, where even though there were some areas that had good relations with these tribes, there were some that didn't. And as a result, Native American women, Indigenous women ended up being like other people within their tribes, facing challenges of displacement, trying to survive, and also being thrown off their Native American homelands and their Indigenous homelands. Then you have the experience of Black women, and even though Berkin does go into a little bit of detail on freed women experiences, it is largely mostly on enslaved women and their experiences. And it does go into detail about how they're struggling in bondage and the challenges they face, as well as the horrific mistreatments they face. Yet at the same time, what they're doing to try and gain some type of legality and having their rights and equality at a time when that wasn't happening in the 17th or even 18th century. So there isn't much detail on the Native American woman, Indigenous woman experience, nor is there anything on the Black woman experience. But it's not surprising just because the book was published in 1996, and even now in 2026, we still have those challenges because we're still doing more research, still trying to find more information. As I mentioned earlier with America's Women by Gail Collins, what we have is what we have. So we have to mix the primary sources that we have with all the secondary source information that we can find too. But what I did like about this book is that it is an entertaining read, and by that I'm referring to the fact that it's a well-written, well-researched, engrossing read. Berkin, as someone that I've admired for a long time because I think she is a great historian and storyteller, I think she does a good job. I had the interesting experience of finally getting the chance to see her at a conference in March 2026, and I can see why she's still held in high regard as a historian and a teacher because she does bring history in an informative but also entertaining way that makes you engrossed and really engaged. And this book is very similar to it, as are her other works that I've read and reviewed, such as the Bill of Rights. And I do think she does bring a very good historical, informative look at things. At the same time, the book was published in 1996, and more information has come out in the 30 years since it's been published. But nonetheless, I did enjoy this book. It's what got me into Carol Berkin and got me in a place where I wanted to do my own research, and I'm happy to see we're having more research done on it even now today in 2026. But in addition to the 17th century she focuses solely on, she does go into more detail about the 18th century in terms of what happens with the American Revolution and also their women's experiences as we go into a new American independence as well. It's not focused on as much as the experiences of the 17th century, but it is embedded there in the book for the 18th century perspective that I think is quite interesting as well. And this concludes my double book review of America's Woman by Gail Collins and First Generations by Carol Berkin. Now tell me what you think. Have you read either of these books? Do you agree with me or not agree with me? Do you think there are other works out there that can give better or similar perspectives on the American woman history and experience that we should read up on more and have better discussions on? Please let me know right in the comments. I welcome all discussions as always. Thank you so much again for tuning in. I will be back next Sunday with another topic video for my reading, as well as an overview of all my summer 2026 reads in short mini reviews at the end of August. And I'll be back with more book content as well. But I'm also going to be bringing, as usual, a random video on Wednesday and a food video on Friday with more shorts. I keep getting delayed on this. I should do better with it, and I haven't gotten down to that. So I'm really trying to push out more shorts as I go along, and I hope you will be here to watch them and always enjoy. Thank you again so much, and I'll see you next time. Bye.